Hello and welcome back to another fun episode of Headspace Diaries, where we explore psychology and related sciences from a student's point of view. I'm your host, Malavika, and today, ready for it? Today is finally the day we talk about the Stanford Prison Experiment. If you've heard about this experiment before, you can probably tell why I am so excited for this. And for those who have not heard of it before, it is because this experiment is one of the most controversial psychological experiments ever conducted. So controversial that it was made into films and documentaries. In August of 1971, psychologist Philip Zimbardo conducted an experiment that was designed to last 2 weeks, but was terminated within 6 days when the experiment went south rather quickly due to escalating psychological abuse and distress among participants. So, what really happened in 6 days that changed our understanding of psychology for years to come? Let's hear the story, shall we? Philip George Zimbardo was born on March 23, 1933, and he was an American psychologist and professor at Stanford University. He was an internationally known researcher and author who wrote more than 500 articles, textbooks, chapters, and much more. He was notably interested in the psychology of evil. Okay, I had to do that. And persuasion and cults and heroism. He is known for his works like The Time Paradox, The Lucifer Effect, and Shyness. And interestingly, he had also worked with Jim Jones's People's Temple cult, who had escaped the massacre in Guyana. And he wrote The Lucifer Effect in response to the prisoner abuse and torture in Abu Ghraib prison in Iraq. The Stanford Prison Experiment was conducted to study the power of roles and rules and how people behave when placed in power or when powerless. This experiment revealed how ordinary people conform to social roles and how situations can strongly shape behavior. So, how did he do it? Good question. He placed an advertisement for volunteers to participate in the study and screened them using interviews and personality tests. At the end, only 24 men out of 75 were selected, and 2 were held in reserve, 1 dropped out, and 10 of the participants were prisoners, while 11 were guards. Now, these participants were mentally and physically stable people. This is what you have to keep in mind. They were mentally and physically stable. They were mature with no history of crime, and they were uninvolved in antisocial behaviors. They were randomly assigned the roles of prisoners or guards and paid $15 for each day they spent in the experiment. On the first day, the prisoners were unexpectedly arrested from their homes, fingerprinted, photographed, and booked, then blindfolded and driven into the mock prison that was the basement of the Stanford University's psychology department. So at this point, you must be thinking that this experiment is a little too realistic and it's not off to a good start. But it gets better, or worse. I'm not sure, because the makeshift prison had barred doors, small cells, and bare walls resembling an actual detention center. These prisoners were then de-individuated. So a side note here is that de-individuation is when people lose their sense of self-identity and self-awareness, and they often adopt the group behavior. So they are no longer thinking for themselves, but thinking from the perspective of the whole group. Now, Zimbardo achieved this de-individuation by asking the prisoners to be stripped naked and deloused, taking away their personal belongings, issuing prison clothes with ID numbers and tight nylon caps to cover their hair, and fitting them with a lockable chain around one ankle. From this point on in the experiment, they were referred to solely by their assigned numbers. They were just one among many prisoners. And this de-individuation was not just among the prisoners, but also the guards. The guards wore identical khaki uniforms, reflective sunglasses to avoid eye contact, whistle, and billy club. They had to be addressed as Mr. Correctional Officer. Three guards worked 8-hour rotations, and additional guards were called if needed. And they were informed that no physical violence was allowed. However, they could do whatever else they wished to maintain order. Now, Zimbardo himself played a dual role. He both oversaw the experiment and played the role of the warden, monitoring both prisoners and guards. Within a brief time, the guards quickly adopted authoritarian, abusive behaviors. On only the second day, the prisoners staged a rebellion that was put down by the guards. They were awakened at 2:30 a.m. for a head count, and some prisoners soon exhibited submissive behaviors. During the rebellion, they removed their stocking caps, tore off their ID numbers, and barricaded themselves inside their cells, which led to a call for reinforcements of guards. And to regain control, the guards blasted the prisoners with the carbon dioxide from a fire extinguisher, forcing them back from the doors. After breaking into the cells, they stripped the prisoners naked, removed their beds, and the ringleaders were taken to solitary confinement. Wow. They continued to humiliate and intimidate the prisoners even after the rebellion, working a system of rewards and punishments to manage the prisoners. So they eroded the solidarity among the prisoners by rewarding the non-rebellious prisoners with privileges like better cells, better meals, and restored uniforms. So talk about divide and rule. By day 3, the guards had taunted the inmates, made them do push-ups, at times with other prisoners sitting on them, and even assigned menial tasks such as cleaning the toilets by hand. They used group punishments, such as punishing an entire cell for the mistake of one prisoner, which led to so much fear and anxiety among the prisoners. Less than 36 hours in, prisoner 8612 began experiencing uncontrollable crying, anger, and disorganized thinking. And the guards offered him a path to stay if he became an informant. So, plot twist. During the parents' visit, they tidied up the prisons, served large meals, and played music to ease their concerns. But soon after that, they intensified surveillance and discipline because of a rumor of a mass escape plan. They made the prisoners endure prolonged sleep deprivation, woke them up to move them from cells to cells, and even made them polish the guards' boots. They made them do repetitive exercise, clean already spotless surfaces, and even count rice. Thus, they ended the experiment less than a week after it had begun. So there are much more gruesome details, much more horrific details that I've left out of this podcast. And if you're interested, make sure to check it out, research about this experiment, and you'll find much more fun but horrible details. So, in fact, let's just get back to the episode. Once they ended the experiment, less than a week after it had begun, they realized that there was an atmosphere of oppression in the experiment. And Zimbardo himself claimed that the experiment's social forces and environmental contingencies had led the guards to behave badly. He admitted that during the experiment, he had sometimes felt more like a prison superintendent than a research psychologist. So, what happened there? Despite having the right to quit the experiment, which is the right of all psychological experiment participants, the prisoners, they behaved as if this was not the case. In fact, when Christina Maslach was brought in for an outside perspective, she was appalled by the guards' behavior. Until her arrival, most outside observers had accepted or even praised the realism of the simulation, but she called out the ethical violations in the experiment. Zimbardo proposed de-individuation and learned helplessness to be the causal factors of the prisoner's submission. And believe it or not, a similar experiment was done years later and documented in the BBC series called The Experiment in 2002. The BBC's mock prisoners turned out to be more assertive than Zimbardo's. The British experimenters call the Stanford experiment a study of what happens when a powerful authority figure, that is Zimbardo, imposes tyranny. If you've been listening so far, then let me know down in the comment section what all ethical violations were present in this experiment. Also, if you have any particular experiment, concept, or topic that you would like to cover, I would be happy to hear them. Please share this with your colleagues or friends if you found this interesting, and thank you for listening. This is your host Malavika signing off.